let's start a movement. Let's start something where we can all get together, share tips, share tricks, vent sometimes. Sometimes you need to just vent and say, is this only happening to me? It's like,
Yes. No, it's happening to me too. Julian, what is something that a lot of people don't know about you?
well, there are plenty of things people don't know about me. I guess the first, it's not really people don't know about me, but it's people get it wrong sometimes. So I am half Argentinian and half Italian. So I have a Spanish name, a first name, and an Italian surname. So the funny thing is Italian people see my name and they say, okay, first name is in Spanish. So I write him in English. And Spanish people see my surname and it's like, ah, he's maybe Italian. So I write him in English. So everybody in the end writes me in English. I would love to talk more in Spanish or Italian. This is something that always happens. Probably something people don't know about me is that I lived in 4 different countries and that I love languages. I'm a bit of a language nerd. Now I'm trying my luck with Chinese. It's going super slow, but I'm actually learning a little bit the basics. Since I grew up in a bilingual home, I had the chance to be exposed to both. So I actually got keen on learning new languages, and that's something that I really, really enjoy and I really love.
Ah,
So,
great. So what languages would you say you're proficient in now?
well, Spanish and Italian. I was equally bilingual at some point, but then with time, I live in Spain now. I also went to university in Argentina, so my language became like stronger, or like my vocabulary grew more in Spanish. So I would say Spanish, Italian, then English, French, and German, because I lived in Germany for 3 years and a bit. So I picked up German there. So yeah, those I would say. Then I have a little bit of others, but just like my name, where I'm from, what do I do, these kind of things.
Enough to get by, right?
Exactly.
I love it. Great. Julian, how did you get into user experience?
Well, kind of through the window, I would say. I started off as a product manager actually, in a really small startup, and at some point I was really into this, going to steep blanks, get out of the building, customer discovery, customer development, talk to people, test your ideas, learn more. And at some point I started doing that, and I noticed, okay, maybe I could be better at this, because I noticed I kind of like realized I had many limitations in that regards. Like, yeah, I don't really know how to interview people. So I started to buy books and get into that, and one thing led to the other. So at some point, like, yeah, there's this thing called UX, and there's something called research that at some point was like included within the whole package, not as UX research per se. So I started getting close to that, and I bought books on how to interview. I mean, I'm talking about like Steve Portigal's interviewing users, Erica Hall. Like, we're going like back to the first, so to say, classics now. We can say classics, right? It's like
They're
2024. Yeah.
excellent resources. I've read their books as well. They're definitely go-to books. Yes.
So at the same time I was doing that, I got the book Sprint. So I
Mm.
got into facilitate. So it was like UX and facilitation came into my life at the same time. So I kind of like got into that. And then I moved to Berlin. I was living in Argentina at the time. I moved to Berlin and I started working with service designers. And then I was doing a mix of facilitation, and then they helped me improve my research skills together with what I was learning through books and so on. So at some point, without even realizing, I became a researcher, and it's like, okay, I'm a researcher now. I do this now.
I love it. You
And
just fell into it, right?
yeah, and it's been already 8 years, quite some
S-
time now.
Wow, that's great. So, Julian, talk a little bit more about that connection between facilitation and UX researcher.
Well, at some point, I started, I think, naturally connecting both. At the beginning, they were not so obviously connected to me, because I was doing, I mean, when I was working with this group of service designers, mostly it was connected to design sprints mostly, or like parts of the sprint. For those who maybe are familiar with that, you have different days. You have 4 days or 5 days, depending on which version you pick. So maybe I was doing one day of that, and one day and the testing. So at some point I started just picking up the exercise and say, okay, fine, I just do this exercise here. Or, oh, this could be really good if we just connected it with the insights we got from the research. So at some point I started mixing both, and I started implementing it into the work because I really liked it and I thought it was super useful and saved me a lot of time. I started kind of being like, push them everywhere. We need to do a kickoff. Why don't we do a workshop? Then after a research project, okay, why don't we do a workshop to maybe do some crazy aids on the ideas that we got? So, this kind of things. And at some point it became kind of another tool in the toolkit for me. It's a thing that can apply to everything at some point. So I apply to mostly to research, but I ended up using it all everywhere, even in my personal life.
Oh, tell me about that. How are you using facilitation in your personal life?
Well, for example, at some point we were organizing a holiday with friends that I use a little I facilitated a little workshop. I was also helping a friend change or reframe how she was positioning for her career and not a people's person. And I don't know about like talent acquisition and so on, but it's like, okay, you're the protagonist here, so I help you sort out your ideas through a little workshop. So these kind of things, very basic workshop still, but they help you organize a group and clear out the dynamics. And it's also fun if you do it the right way. It's super fun.
Yeah. Were you using a digital whiteboard for your personal facilitation?
Nah, not really. That's super old school with the post-its and everything on the wall. So
But people
so
like that, right? They like that activity and that movement of those old school physical notepads, right? Or sticky
yeah.
notes.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, Miro, FigJam, all these tools are great and they're super convenient, and especially if you have a team that is like in multiple locations and so on, it's super useful. But yeah, when you're in person, it's a different vibe. When you do a workshop or a session or even like a retreat all together and you maybe work on something, it's a completely different animal and completely different vibe. At some point, I like it more. It's going to a concert versus listening to the recording of that concert live a little bit.
That's fair.
Um, but yeah, I actually miss like in-person facilitation a lot now that you mention it.
It is a different vibe. I find it challenging to recreate, right? Especially if people don't turn their cameras on and you can't see if they're paying attention or actually involved. So it is a challenge for sure.
Yeah, definitely. The turning on the camera thing is a classic, especially when you have a workshop with like 10, 12 people, you probably have 3, 4 cameras off and you have to, hey, let's get together, show your faces. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Now maybe since I don't know, I don't know, in different countries it's a different setting, but since companies are maybe going hybrid, you can probably let's one day we all go to the office and we can make the most out of that and you can play around. But during COVID it was like you really had to, give your best to get the energy flowing and to keep the vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely a challenge there. So, Julian, what's on your mind these days?
Plenty of things. These days have been super, super filled with things, really. I'm creating this little universe called From Finders to Builders, which
Okay.
is
Tell me about that.
it's a little bit funny that I call it universe, but the thing is like I release many things at the same time. So I released the new website with a newsletter, the podcast, and now a community. So everything is for first researchers in the organization or teams of one. Being the first one or the only one can be a bit lonely sometimes, and also in terms of the challenge for a researcher, it's a little bit of a particular challenge because it kind of combines being a researcher with the operations part. So it's a mix of both, and you also have to start something. You need to also help build the culture, build the infrastructure, and build the relationship. So it's a little bit of a mixed role with different things. So it's a very particular challenge. I've been the first researcher in most of my career. I've been the first researcher or even the only one sometimes. So I've been there even with clients through the agency. That's pretty much my experience. Was actually fine because I noticed more people were reaching out to me or people that I was mentoring. It's like, yeah, I'm the first researcher. And so it's okay, fine. Let's start a movement. Let's start something where we can all get together, share tips, share tricks, vent sometimes. Sometimes you need to just vent and say, is this only happening to me? It's like,
Yes. No, it's happening to me too. Why did you find that that was kind of your niche or the problem you wanted to try to solve? That first researcher or a UX researcher of one? Why was that? I know you said because you've been that person, but why are you honing in on that need?
well, apart from that bit, it's because I believe that a big chunk of the future of UX research lies in all those companies that don't have a researcher yet and those researcher jobs that might open in the long run. And all those jobs would be first researchers. So we have, we have different flows. We have people coming to the industry. We have people who are transitioning from different parts of maybe tech or product, maybe from different places or academia even. Plus we have the challenge of being the first researcher. So there are many things going on. And I think that in the upcoming years, if we are also, if us as researchers, we are successful at showcasing our value and showcasing why companies should have researchers, I think this is going to create an effect of new jobs that are going to open. And and for me, this is where I can create value because I've been there. I have no idea how to work in a team of 50 researchers because I've never been there, or how to build the operations for 100 researchers or like different verticals and different, no clue. But this I know. This has been pretty much my career. So I said, okay, fine. This is where I can create value. So why not help first researchers who are starting now and maybe researchers who are going to be the first researchers in the future?
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you find, Julian, are some of the biggest challenges when you are that solo researcher?
Well, okay, do we have a whole episode in this? So there are many challenges, and this will also it will vary depending on what kind of company you're joining and who's bringing you in. So it depends on how do they perceive research, if they were conducting some sort of research before and they need someone to step up their game versus someone believes in research, maybe a VP of product or a design lead or some, and they bring the researcher, and that's a different game because you need to fight a different fight. So the challenges are very different, and somehow they're kind of case to case basis because it can change completely depending on how you're brought in. The challenges most people or most researchers face is like, okay, how do other teams adopt research? How do they think of research? How do they understand the value that research can bring? How can they make better decisions? How can also, in some cases, how can they be enabled or empowered to conduct certain sorts of research with a researcher next to them? That's important. It's not just, yeah, okay, you go and do the research. How do you create these synergies? And then also all the challenges outside the product organization. Okay, how do people maybe in senior management understand research, and how can research help mitigate risk or help the company make better decisions? So there are different challenges at different levels. And you also have the whole challenge of the building the infrastructure. It's not just like, hey, here comes the researcher. Now we know more, we know better. You say, okay, how do we create systems? How do we create processes to get the right customers within the guidelines that we need to comply with, or with a good cadence? How do we actually incentivize? How do we nurture these relationships? All these things are also a big part of the challenge that relates to the infrastructure part. So that's probably, I would say, 50% of the role.
And when you say
Sometimes.
infrastructure, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming you mean internal infrastructure as well as an infrastructure with customer or user facing, right? How you're going to tackle both of those fronts. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. And also it's not just inside the research team, but also connecting with other teams. For example, let's imagine you work in a B2B company and you also need to coordinate with customer success or customer support. How do you connect with them? How often? What are the things? What are the things you discuss in, for example, customer calls? Or what are the things? Oh, how can you get other teams to chip in and also bring knowledge to you? So all that infrastructure outside the research team is something that you also need to build, all those channels of communication or channels that can help insights flow within, or knowledge flow within the organization. It can get super big if you think about it. Sometimes in larger companies, maybe you have an operations person dedicated to that, and here you have to kind of like wear different hats, because at the same time, not only you need to build the infrastructure for your practice to thrive, or to actually to start shaping up a practice, but you also need to conduct research yourself, and hands-on research most likely, because at some point, yeah, we brought in a researcher, so yeah, okay, where's the research? So you also need to do that. So
Yeah, it's true.
you need to balance between both.
Yeah, for sure. You actually have to do some research around building a good foundation and getting your partners brought along with you. Yeah, that makes sense. So about the UX team one or UX researcher one, or one of the earlier ones, and thinking about getting that buy-in and making those connections within the company in your internal teams or whatnot. What do you find that you wish those other people knew about UX that you are surprised they don't really know? What do you wish that they knew that you didn't have to explain?
Okay. This is a really good question. Maybe I can make it specific to research in this case.
Sure.
One of the things that sometimes is a little bit of a misconception is that research is simply talking to customers. Yeah, okay, you go and talk to customers, but it's like much more deeper than that. It's about triangulating, about using different methods. It's way more than that. And sometimes that's something that is not that they are not valuing the work we do, but they think it's either that it actually is sometimes. Not always, but that's something that I face many times, especially, with maybe product counterparts or even part of the organization. Okay, you're talking to customers. I can also do that. You're just the executor. I need you to send a survey to this type of users. This kind of thing is more like probably something that I would like them to think of is about UX or research as a strategic partner in this, and kind of like another leg of this table. We should all get together and there's no, okay, I got and you execute. That's probably something that I wish more people understood. And that research takes time also. Yeah, we can deliver fast. We can cut some corners here and there, but you can only squeeze so much. At some point, if we need to talk to 15 people, we need to talk to 15 people, and this is pretty much how it will go. And probably one thing that I face many times is the expectation that you will find gold every time you dig. Every time you do research, you will find groundbreaking stuff that now will change the direction of the product completely. And sometimes it's not the case. And sometimes there are things like, yeah, we need more time. We need a better signal. We don't know about this yet. We cannot conclude, this kind of things. And that's something that I face many times. They're like, okay, you talk to 10 customers. What? Tell me now. Okay, what do we do? It's like, yeah, okay, we are not sure. We're not so sure about this. We should maybe try another method to complement this. It's like, oh no, but it took 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've been there. And what about the scenario where they say, we already knew that. You're not bringing us anything new. We already knew that.
Well, you can answer this in different ways. You can say, you knew that. How did you know that? Did you know that because it was your hunch? If that was your hunch, now you have actual data to support that. Not only you know that, but now you know is most likely true, or that you have higher confidence that this is actually this way. So that's one thing. If they knew that because at some point they conducted some research 3 years ago and they face the same, you can say, okay, fine, the situation stays the same. If not, it's like there was some miscommunication when we started the project because he kind of like wanted me to research something. Then it's more about, okay, what are we expecting to get out of this project? What decision were you trying to make? Or what were the things that you were looking for here? That's also probably worth assessing before conducting the research. There are different answers to this.
Yeah, that's fair. I've been there where we went over a research plan and we talked about what the study was going to be and what outcomes we expected to get from that, conducted the research and sharing my findings. And they're like, well, why didn't you find out this and that? And I was like, where was that when we discussed this plan? I can't ask these questions after the fact, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a classic. Yeah. Oh, I wish you found this out. It's like, yeah, well.
I wish you would have told me you wanted to know that. That happened quite a bit. So we talked about, I don't want to say evangelizing, but maybe educating people on UX within your team or your partners. What if people who are kind of breaking into UX research and they don't know what to expect? What do you wish they would know about UX research, kind of entering the field or just becoming that first UX researcher in an organization?
Okay. This is, I have two answers to this again. Sorry for being like opening more. Sometimes, in other places, I always say like, I sometimes give the most researchy answers, which are like, it depends, which is very researchy. Don't we all say that? That's the first thing we learn in researcher school. Research 101, you have to answer, it depends. And then comes your explanation.
Exactly.
So for people entering the field, well, they have to maybe be aware that they might have to face some tough battles when it comes to research. So this is pretty much the status of this. If you are breaking into the industry, apart from the job search and how do you position yourself and present your profile and so on, and portfolio and all this job hunt part, apart from that, if you're a designer coming into an organization, you probably have a very different spot than a researcher coming in an organization. So for those coming into the industry, they should be aware that there are a lot of, I don't want to say fight because it sounds like we're like very, like like aggressive or something, but you know what I mean? There are many conversations we need to have. Maybe we can put it that way. So tough conversations that we need to have, and that they should be patient and they should not be discouraged when their research is not used the first time, or if they face some backlash. And so they need to have some tough, like not a shell or like an armor, but they need to be tough in that sense. They need to be a bit resilient, especially if the organization is still not familiar with research. If you're starting out and you come into an organization and you face like backlash, is like it's easier to get discouraged. It's like, why am I even a researcher? Why didn't I pick up Figma or something? So that's one thing. And then people like first researcher, because maybe people who are the first researcher, they're also senior. It can happen. One super interesting thing about first researchers is that sometimes they're senior, sometimes they're junior. And it's not so strange to find someone who just their first job is being the first researcher at the company. That's also part of what pushed me to start this little universe and share some tips and some content on that, because not only they're junior or they're starting in the field, but also they're starting in a very disadvantageous environment, so to say. So you have seniors and juniors and midweight, so it's a little bit mixed. But overall, that apart, I would say that one of the most important things we need to have in mind when you're the first researcher is that we shouldn't try to become the enlightened one, the oracle of research. And it's not that we are the owners of the truth, we are the voice of the customer, and so on. And also, we shouldn't be the only ones actually bringing insights to the table. Instead, we should try to become a builder to build all those channels and have different parties involved, have different parties chip in, have different insights from different sources. And maybe if you want, become instead of an oracle, becoming a connector of knowledge. The ones that, okay, we administrate the knowledge, we connect the knowledge from different teams, and we empower the rest to be better at learning, to be better at collecting data, and then making sense of everything. It's important how we position ourselves in that regard. So if we position us, okay, I go do the research and I tell you all the wonderful stuff that I found, or not, because we say sometimes you don't find anything. So we can position ourselves as that, but that's not sustainable in the long run, especially if you're a team of one. So you need to be smart and say, okay, how can I play this game? It's a different game. I always use this sports analogy of being a playmaker and help everybody play better and elevate everybody's game.
So you mentioned encouraging everyone to bring insights to the table, right? So the researcher is not the oracle, they're the connector. So what tips do you have to help people to encourage their team to have others bring those insights to the table?
Well, what you need to build there is relationships mostly. And first, you need to understand that, yeah, the research team, or even as the researcher, the research team is a research team of one when you're the first one, but still a research team. So as a research team, we go and we research customers, or we talk to customers and so on, but we are not the only ones doing that. Probably at an organization, there are different people doing that in different ways, in different levels, with different cadences, with different objectives. But the first thing you need to do is like talk to those people and say, hey, folks in customer success, how often are you talking to customers? What are you doing? Are you having sessions with them? Are you calling them on the phone? What are you talking about? And so on. Then saying, okay, are there things from other parts of the organization that could be useful for you that you don't know? And it's like, yeah, we'd like to know more. I'm making this up, right? But this is usually like something they ask for. But product roadmap, for example. Okay, fine. Then you connect the knowledge here. Then you go to sales. Okay, sales. How often are you talking to prospects? What are you getting out of them? Are you asking this question or why don't you ask this? Basically collaborating and creating this awareness that they are also a touch point that can bring super valuable information. For example, I don't know, where you lose or win deals. That's something super valuable, because sometimes, yeah, they went with a competitor. They like our feature. We're lacking here. We're lacking that. So they're a super important touch point. So trying to connect all those bits and create this kind of different streams of insights can help you then say, okay, this came from CS, this came from sales, this came from support, this came from research, this came from product. So you start connecting, and then when you start showcasing everybody the process, now you triangulate different bits of information. You can then tell them, look, we're getting better quality of information. We're triangulating. We're more confident about what we know, and we have different angles to this. So you need to get some first couple of partner in crime partners can try to go on board with this, which then will bring the rest. So I think this is a lengthy process. It won't be something that you can achieve overnight. But if you manage to do that as a first researcher, then research as a team or as a function, then you can keep on providing insight from the research side, and then you can make this better. But this all comes from the premise that the researcher is the enabler and the connector, instead of just the sole digger, just the sole, capture of information.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like you're cultivating a little bit of a universe of knowledge, right? By tapping into these different sources. That's really cool. I have been in organizations, and maybe you've encountered this too, Julian, where research was expected to go off into a corner and do research and come back with the results. And maybe the product partner would be like, I'm too busy to participate in your research or observe. Just go out and find out what I need you to find out and just come back and tell me. Have you ever been in that situation?
Yes.
Countless. Okay. Yes. So how do we fight that? How do we overcome those divides between UX research being done solo and bringing our team along so that they're hearing those insights and participating in hearing the knowledge firsthand from the users?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me challenge that a little bit.
Okay.
So it depends.
I mean, you went 5 minutes without saying it depends, so that's fair.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say this, for example, a product manager says, okay, I expect you to go and find this stuff out. But then when you bring the stuff, they actually hear you out and you're an important voice for them and they see you as a strategic partner. I see no harm there. I see, okay, fine. They're like, we are counterparts. We're a team. We all go after one objective, or we want to, work well. So this is how it goes. I don't see any problem there. But the thing is, sometimes, and I would say most of the times, it's not like that. It's like, okay, you go, and then when you bring the results back, they're like, yeah, but this doesn't really fit what we are looking for, or this, we are really thinking of actually shipping that feature, but yeah, we're pretty much into development now. So I don't know if we can, whatever. Or we promised this to this customer, so I don't think we can. That happened countless times. That's probably where you were trying to go with your question. So apart from the nice product folk who consider us counterparts and strategic partner, when we go to this situation, probably you need to encourage to at least attend 1 or 2 sessions from each project. If you are working maybe with a trio, let's say engineering and design and product, and you're like the 4th musketeer there, you can say, okay, fine, at least divide. We're doing 9 interviews, do 3, 3, and 3, or at least 6, so 2, 2, and 2, but kind of like mix up. So everybody in the team also here, it's not just about one stakeholder, but everybody. So they will also have different perspectives. I would say, look, if this is a project that is relevant to you and is relevant to the organization and so on, I think that you can afford giving 2 hours in 3 weeks or 2 weeks to listen to customers firsthand and get in touch with that and hear their voice and hear their concerns and so on, because it will change your perspective completely. And it will then make you better, whatever. It could make you a better engineer. It can make you a better designer. It can make you a better product manager, because in the end, we're designing for people. It's not just we're designing for the void or for whatever. It's like we are designing for people. So hearing people, hearing their voice, their concerns, their problems will make you a better professional in the long run, if this is what you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love that you point out, have them listen to a couple of interviews or sessions or whatever that might be, observe, because sometimes they hear that one time and they latch onto that. Well, that person did this. And it's like, I understand, but they're actually an outlier in the study and that one little nugget that they saw. So if you kind of ask them to participate in more than one, that they do get a little bit more of a diverse perspective on what's happening in the research.
Yeah, definitely. That's also why I recommend mixing it up a little bit and not just inviting one stakeholder, but the whole team. So in case one stakeholder really wants to hold onto that piece of feedback, maybe they could be challenged not by the researcher, but maybe they're challenged by, I don't know, the product manager is challenged by the engineer or the designer, and then you can also chip in because you saw the whole study, and you can help orchestrate that. And going back to the beginning, if you do that within the context of a workshop, that's super interesting. But that's opening another branch, and we can branch out here to workshops and research again.
Yeah, it's true. I agree with you. Having more than one person on observing an interview or whatnot, and then having a debrief, it does two things. One, the first one you said, which is like other people were like, oh, that didn't really stand out to me, but what did stand out to me was this. And if they've been on the project for a really long time, they can bring previous context. Oh yeah, we tested this feature out before and this worked or this didn't work or this user said this, right? So they can have that longitudinal perspective, which can be biased a little bit. That's fair, but that's why having a group discussion can sometimes mitigate and balance out some of that bias that might be creeping into those.
Yeah, definitely agree. A debrief with all these factors in is the way to go. We can also call it, as I said, debrief could be in one way, could be in another. You can use sessions, workshops, whatever. But I think this is definitely the way to go. Yeah, I 100% agree there.
Yeah, yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit, Julian, and talk about what seems to be what everyone is talking about, which is AI. So, what's your take on AI and its relationship or not to UX research?
Can I say the magic words?
Of course. I would expect nothing less. And then you can elaborate on that.
Okay. So it depends, as we know. As you know, it really, I think there are different uses of AI, and this is very broad, and this is also still early stage, I would say. Well, not so early anymore, but like we're still in the dawn of AI, I would say. So we still need to understand how it works and what are the limitations and so on. Also, from maybe this is a very Eurocentric point of view, but how's customer data compliant with the GDPR regulation that we have? I know some companies, for example, I work with some clients in the EU that they don't want to use any AI because it's like, okay, if we're using any AI to, let's say, go through customer feedback or any sort of things, we're actually putting their information there. Company is really sensitive. We really need to figure out how it works in that context. But apart from that, it's very different to use AI as an aid for maybe getting a transcript with timestamps and getting a theme sort. It's very different than using AI as AI users to us stuff. I know that there are some platforms that they offer, they have these users that they're supposed to be customer profiles that they're trained and you ask them stuff. Okay, fine. The AI said that we should build this. It's like, that's probably suicidal if you want. That's crazy. So I would not do that. But if you use it for other things like automating stuff or helping you sort out feedback and organize stuff and tag and synthesize, that's probably a good way to use it. So I think I'm not super excited about AI because we still need to understand how it works and where the limitations are. But I think there's some potential there, definitely. And I think in terms of making our process more agile, I think it could be very, very helpful in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. It's early days. I know it feels like it's been around for a long time, but 5 years from now, we're gonna be like, "Wow, remember when AI was like this and how much it's changed?" I also feel like it's lacking a bit of context. It doesn't have that context that human beings have when they're overlooking an entire study, right? Or an entire product. If you isolate the synthesis of one set of interviews, the AI doesn't understand how that plays into what's been done before or what's on the roadmap. Those kind of shortcomings, right? And you hear about someone building a persona, just throwing in a few data points, say, build me a persona based on yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Because there are tools that do that right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a fan of personas anyway, so even using AI to build a persona sounds like a nightmare to me. So
Great. And that sounds like you and I need to have a side conversation about personas because I too am not a big fan. So that will be another time. We
that's
don't
another
have that kind of time.
that's another episode.
Indeed, I'm with you there. Absolutely. So, Julian, has your point of view changed about user experience through the years as you've been more involved?
I think apart from user experience in general, in particular, I want to focus on research because that's the thing I focus on.
Absolutely.
And And my point of view in terms of research has changed. I can connect this to, this pretty popular article. I mentioned it on my podcast too. It's mentioned everywhere. It was super popular by Jude Antin called The Reckoning is Here.
Yes.
He talks about the different levels of research and so on. He talks about how we should move from one to the other. But my perspective on research was at the beginning, okay, fine, we make this usable. We help designers design this better because we work on the usability part of things, or if this feature is desired or not. But actually started to realize with time as I did more research, and then I started then changing my context, working in different companies in different countries. And so that actually research permeates the whole organization and it's more about just collecting the data. Sometimes you're not aware how much information is contained within an organization and how much we can extract from that. My realization there is that, okay, we're maybe always focusing on, okay, let's go and do a study, let's go and research. But if you just drill down, there's so many things we can find out. And even if we go outside and we actually conduct the research and we look for new, fresh insights from customers and so on, we can connect that and triangulate that and make that even stronger. So instead of blocking everybody and saying, I'm the one doing the research, okay, let me take a look at what you're doing here and let me help you here and let's connect all that. So becoming a connector is something that it's a little bit of a mindset shift, but I think that's super important for first researchers.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So my perspective changed in two levels, how big and how impactful in different levels and in different sides of the organization research can be. And also how much we can leverage because at some point I thought my little world was just design world or the product world, but in the end there's so many things around that you can touch and you can connect and that completely changed the way I approach my role or my feeling as a researcher. I feel very differently now than say 4 years ago even.
Yeah. What I think I'm hearing you say, Julian, is maybe you used to focus on the usability of a product, a little bit more of a microscopic view. But now you're understanding how research can impact more broadly across an organization and focus on the people using the product rather than just the product itself. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Not only the people using the product, but also the people building the product, which is also something that sometimes we overlook. Because when we go and we talk to customers, we look through our stuff, we synthesize everything we can with the, let's say, the research output, quote unquote. It's a product that we are delivering. It's like, hey, this is our stuff. But this is consumed and read by different people in the organization. So you also need to understand them. How do they consume that? What kind of information they consume and so on, and how you should present it to make the most impact possible. So it's not just for people who are like using the product, but people who are building. So that also is part of what changed throughout the years. I was always focusing too much on the outside, but also it's like inside and outside kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. So, Julian, what do you hope for the future of UX research?
Well, this might sound a little bit obvious, but because of what I'm doing now, but I hope more and more companies start realizing the value research can bring to their organization, or maybe not only research, but researchers can bring to the organization, and that more companies start hiring their first one. I noticed that in the last couple of years, the distribution of team were like tend to be large teams, and then in maybe large organization, and you have like small teams popping up. In the last couple of months, I would say year and a half, I started seeing like a lot of teams of one popping up too, which is kind of interesting. And I think this is something that I really hope it stays and actually scales. And those team of one or two that popped up last year, they become a team of two or three, and then no teams of zero, so to say, become teams of one. So all those companies start hiring that, so we can become, a more present function in companies, not only in tech but also outside tech. Sometimes we are stuck in our tech bubble, but there's so many companies that would really benefit from a researcher. Maybe they're not even in tech, or they have just like 10% of what they do is tech. So that too.
Yeah, absolutely. A team of one has to start somewhere, right? Before it can scale. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be a UX researcher if I didn't ask you this final question. And that is, what, if anything, would you like to share that we didn't touch upon today?
I love that question. Well, that's a really good one, and you cut me off guard a little bit. And now I cannot use the magic words to get out of this.
Nope, not this time.
Not this time.
Uh.
I would like to mention that we haven't discussed before. I need to think a little bit about this one. Mhm. Well, probably something that I also would like to talk about. This can also be another episode in itself. I notice a lot of people are talking about how we can call it continuous discovery or product discovery or whatever with discovery because they're using different terminology for the same thing. How this is becoming trendy, how is this becoming the norm for some organizations, and how are researchers a little bit displaced and maybe not considered. So at some point when this started, I actually thought this could be a great opportunity for researchers. And I still think if we frame it the right way, it can be. And I know some people who are doing this and they're being very successful at it and they're actually creating researcher jobs out of this because teams are facing the truth that yeah, we need a specialist here. So probably the whole product discovery discussion needs to be taken forward. And actually, we as researchers, we should probably position ourselves. Okay, we should be the ones leading this, so we can lead this. We can help out. We can actually build infrastructure for this, and this is part of our job, and we should defend that bit because everybody can come along. You know, we can all go and do discovery together. We can all do then test this together, but together, not just you on your side and no researchers involved. I'm trying to be super fast with this because I don't want to talk 20 minutes or because we would need a full episode on this only most most
Oh, yeah.
likely. So for all researchers out there, if you are facing conversations regarding this, remember that you are the ones, the perfect people to lead these efforts. You know, product discovery or continuous discovery could be great if you do it, if you use it the right way, if you build it correctly, and so on. But I'm always of the idea that this should be led by researchers. Everybody's involved, everybody's happy, is like gladly invited and welcome to join, but this should be led by researchers. So
I agree. You're right on that front. It should be led by researchers. And two, it is a whole nother episode that we can't dive into today, unfortunately. But really, thank you so much, Julian. This has been so much fun.
me too. Thanks a lot, Jen. Thanks for inviting me. I had a great time.
Check out all my interviews with industry leaders on BlatzChatz.